Morning, Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. I'm Larissa. My video diary. It's time to drink some skulls. Oh, it is. It's time. It's time to drink some skulls. So yesterday, the February issue did arrive, and it looks really good. Well, I have some questions about their, I think that their machine was running out of toner because some of the printing, it looks a little faded on some of the pages. But anyway, it finally arrived, so I'm glad. Yeah. And I finished the layout. I finished the March issue. Now I just gotta start on proofing for that. And oh my God, then start. I need to start the April. I have some ideas for April. I do. I have some ideas for April. So this loom that I'm working on, I didn't go into the gallery yesterday. I didn't go into the studio to work. I just stayed home, and the house did get cleaned and everything. The roof was not started yesterday. Whatever. But I got towels done. And I got I got some writing. I got some writing done yesterday. So that was good. But this loom I'm working on, these pieces are heavy and they're meaningful. And so there's been a bunch of stuff coming up in my YouTube clips about the Islamic attacks against community in UK. And there's people in the United States saying that, oh, there's going to be Islamophobia. Oh my gosh. When people are attacking you, I don't think it's a phobia, right? And no, it's not all Muslim people, right? Like, and my experience is horrendous with Islam, right? Like, there's no way in hell I'd ever become a Muslim. So I was asking Omar the other evening if he had helped make arrangements for, when his mother dies, because everybody dies. I mean, we're not like, oh, she's gonna die tomorrow or anything. I mean, we don't talk to her or anything. But the reason I asked is because his father is buried in a Muslim cemetery, right? And there weren't any spots on either side of him, right? Like, there was just no thinking about that, except that I don't know if his mom truly is Muslim, or if she is anymore, or what. And I wouldn't believe anything that came out of her mouth anyway, because she is a compulsive liar and hypocrite. So, like, when his dad was dying, his father came to me for spiritual consultation. And because he had not been to a mosque in decades, right? He did not associate with other Muslims. He did not raise his son Muslim. And I understand why. And it's not because he wasn't Muslim. It's kind of like how I feel about Christianity, right? I've had such horrible experiences with other Christians and with Christian organizations that I don't want anything to do with them, but it has not affected my personal relationship with my faith, right? So there were lots of things that I did not agree with his father about, but we did have a mutual respect for each other. And when he was dying, he came to me for spiritual counsel. I am a licensed non-denominational minister. I am technically, legally, Reverend Larissa DeRoog. Um, it was challenging. It was challenging doing that, but he shared things with me. One of the things that he shared with me, because when people are dying, there's loose ends. The loose ends are the things that they're most concerned about, right? Loose ends / regrets. And they hadn't gone about making arrangements for death, he and my mother-in-law. And he said to me, because he was telling me all the things he wanted me to make sure that got taken care of. And then, oh my God. So I'd get up every morning very early when I was back there with Omar, and sit with his dad in the morning before he'd go to, before Omar got up, before Sheila got up, and before it was time for him to go to chemo or doctor's appointments or whatever, which Omar took him to those things. I went with them a few times when I was there, but Omar was the one who drove him to chemo and all that stuff. I'd sit with him, and I gave him Reiki, and for lack of a better word, we prayed together. But when you say that, I wasn't sitting there saying the rosary, and he wasn't clicking a mala and all this shit. Um, there were things that he shared with me, like he was concerned. He said he was like, we have not. He said make sure that Omar helps his mom get burial plans made for herself. He said, because this is going to be terrible. He said, this is going to be very stressful. And I'm like, okay. So I was asking Omar about that last night. I said, did you ever, I said, have you made arrangements for your mother? And he got all like, what are you asking that for? I don't know. It just came up in my mind. And part of it is because I'm working on these pieces right now, getting ready to work on this work, or doing this work. And then because I've been watching these clips, so he has made arrangements, and she's not being buried in the Muslim cemetery. She's being buried in an adjacent plot that is, non-affiliated. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what that means. Right? Is it because the Muslims don't want her? Or is it because she does not consider herself Muslim anymore? Because when his dad was dying, so I think it was the first time Omar took his dad to chemo by himself, and I was at the house with her by myself. And the night before, we were all together in the living room, and I asked him, I said, Muhammad, I said, what are your wishes? I said, what is it that you want to happen after what is it that you want to happen here? That's what I asked him. And he said, well, he says, I want to die soon, and then I want Mom to come out there and live with you. And Sheila was in the kitchen. She was making tea or coffee or something, and she looked at me. So the next day, Omar takes his dad to the doctor, to chemo, or whatever the appointment was. I think it was for chemo, because was it for chemo? May have been for a checkup after the first round of chemo, because I think I went with them for the first round of chemo. I went to them for the diagnosis and prognosis appointment, or for the prognosis appointment. I went with him for the prognosis appointment, and then I went went with him for the first round of chemo. And I sat next to him and held his hand yeah. Anyway, we were in the kitchen, and Sheila says to me, she says, "Yeah, we were talking about him being there or whatever." And she said, "Oh, you're going to be my kefir." I was like, "Excuse me, what?" I didn't know what the word meant. I didn't know what the word meant at the time. I had to look it up, and she said that to me. She said those words to me. Yeah, she said to me, "You are going to be my slave." Hmm. Yeah. She's like, "Oh yes, you're one of the people of the book." She says, "Unless you convert, you will be my kefir." Yeah. And I told her at that time, I said, "Sheila, you've been telling me, demanding that I was going to convert to Islam since the day Omar and I started, since the day Omar and I told you we were getting married, and it's not going to happen. I will never, ever, ever put on a pedestal a polygamous pedophile. Never. Never." Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And I reminded her of that when she told me I was going to be her kafir. I said, "Oh, no, no, that's not going to happen." So, even among now, people who are moderate or modern, these beliefs are shaping and pervasive. Omar wasn't there to hear her say that to me. And for a long time, he told me it wasn't true, that she didn't say that. I'm like, "Yeah, she did." I'm pretty sure he believes me now. Um, but I'm watching these clips with these imams talking about, they do these mobbed rapes, right, of young girls. And some of them are, you know, as young as 9 years old. And Aisha, the youngest wife of Muhammad, was 9 years old when they married, right? So, you know, in fundamentalist Islam, as soon as you start menstruating, which can be as early, I was 9 years old when I got my first period, then you're eligible for marriage because you're able to get pregnant, right? Because Islam sees women as animals. Islam sees women and anybody who is not a Muslim as an animal slave to Muslim men. That is what the religion is. They believe that, right? Is that the only belief? No. But that is a shaping tenet of the faith. And, people say, "Oh, it doesn't happen here. It's not." There's female genital mutilation, which is not only a Muslim, doesn't only happen in Islamic um, uh, faith, but mostly does because of where it originates, where the pagan belief originates around the magic of a woman's clitoris, right? The magic of a woman's clitoris to keep a woman from enjoying any kind of pleasure. They see the female orgasm as having no purpose, right? And being a source of evil and magic and witchery. So they cut that out. Similar to, like, in African countries where tribes, there are some tribes who have beliefs about people who are albino being witches and they kill and take their body parts, right? Yeah, that's what female genital mutilation is about. Yeah. Yes. And in the history of the caliphate, um, when they would conquer a village, they would rape all the women, and many of them would be killed. And the men, the ones that weren't killed, and the young boys who were taken as slaves, would be emasculated. hmm They would remove their genitals. Not gender affirming surgery, although I view gender affirming surgery in much the same way. This is where it comes from. I believe energetically this is where it comes from, and I believe that people that suffer with gender dysphoria have a have a have a karmic there's karmic memory. I believe that this is an issue of reincarnation, and that there's past life baggage around this thing because it was commonplace. It was commonplace. I mean, it would be entire villages. When a village would be taken, you know, maybe only 10% of the people were left to live, and that's how harems were filled. Historical fiction, The Aviary Gate, is about a woman, an Eastern European woman. It's from the perspective of an Eastern European woman who's taken, right, by the caliphate. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, so, I don't know. It's here in the United States too. Um, there are cases of female genital mutilation in this country. Um, and like when we were first living at the cotton mill in Oakland, there was a diner that was over there, and there was a taqueria over in Jingletown. Taqueria was not open all the time. Usually it was open as a bar, but sometimes they were open for food during the day. And we had gone over there, we had walked over there to have lunch. And there was Keffa Coffee, there was this shitty little diner, Nico's, but it was 24/7. And then there was this other bar slash taqueria, and they were open. And we'd walked over to have lunch, probably at Keffa, and saw that the taqueria was open. And went for lunch, and we were like, oh, well, let's go there, because we hadn't been there before. And the food was okay, whatever. And we were coming out, and as we were coming out of that restaurant, it was a weird intersection there that was right where you come off of Alameda Island into Oakland, and across the Alameda Bridge. And there's this weird, like, turnaround, right? Because the train tracks all come up there, and there's switchovers, and there's this weird little space. And there's a gas station. There's a 7-Eleven. There's a 7-Eleven that's over there too. When we came out into the parking lot, there were like 3 police officers and this man, and this little girl in a burqa, and he was wearing tribal garments as well. But little girl in a burqa, and he was screaming. He was screaming, and there was a woman cop trying to talk to the little girl. Or no, it wasn't a woman cop. It was a male cop. They were all male cops. One was trying to talk to the little girl, and the guy was screaming at him, and I don't know what language it was. I don't know whether it was Pashtun or Urdu, or Arabic or whatever. I don't think it was Arabic, though. It didn't. I've heard a lot of Arabic spoken. I don't speak any, but I've heard a lot of Arabic spoken. It didn't sound like Arabic to me. Um, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go talk to them. And Alma's like, oh, no. I said, no, I'm gonna go talk to him. Walked up to the cops. I said, what's going on here? And he said, oh, we're trying to figure out what he's doing with this little girl. Now, I took one look at her and saw that her hands and feet were dipped, and that's wedding. It wasn't an Eid. and she was awfully small to be wearing a burqa, right? And that's, I've had henna done, and I've studied about henna and know a lot of people who do henna, and that is that's bridal henna. And it was fresh. It was fresh, like within the last couple days. And she had these. I mean, the burqa was so ugly. It was so ugly. It was just this, it was like this big black bag, a little bit of net over her eyes, right? And her feet, she was wearing, they were child's sandals. They had a little heel on them, and a bow, and they were kind of like a pearly white, and then her little tiny little feet, like probably a 4.5, right? And I said, he says, well, we're trying to figure out if this is his daughter. I said, no, this is probably his wife. And oh, I can't, no, no, this isn't his wife. And I said, well, probably is. He says, well, we can't figure out because we can't, none of us can talk to him. And I said, well, if you get a translator down here who speaks Arabic, they'll be able to speak to him. I said, but you better bring a man to talk to him and a woman to talk to her. I said, because they said she won't even talk. I said, well, she might not speak English, and if she does, she's not going to speak to a man. Certainly not in front of him. And they're like, oh. I said, you need to get somebody on. It's like, well, what if? But I don't. How do you know if he speaks Arabic? I said, well, he's obviously very Muslim, and all Islamic prayer is done in Arabic, so they all speak it. I was like, oh, like yeah, but I walked away just feeling sick to my stomach for that little girl. The guy was probably, he was at least 30, maybe older. And I didn't see her face, but based on her feet and those shoes, she was probably like 9 years old. Yeah. I just felt sick. I just felt sick. Yeah. And that was the neighborhood where they spray painted Sunni twat outside of our bedroom window on the overpass. So, I think about all these things while I'm working on these rugs. So, where did I learn about rug making? I learned about rug making and the history of rugs in college. We talked about it a little bit, Western rugs and stuff, in my studio classes. But I had to, as a craft major, I had to take a history class. It's required, called History of Craft, and it was taught by a curator at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and the Detroit Institute of Arts was on the CCS campus. Their campus is abut, and they're partnered, or they were at least then. I'm sure they still are. The woman who was the instructor, I can't remember her name, but I can see her face. She was wonderful. She was so, so, so knowledgeable and so compassionate about the work. But the DIA has the largest Islamic collection in the United States, and there's not a whole. I mean, the things that are included in Islamic art are very limited, and by limited I mean in what is art, because art has historically been highly regulated in Islamic society for similar reasons as it was, pre-Chagall in Jewish society, and still is in some some parts of Jewish society. But the idea that a human being makes something is seen as haram, because it is seen as putting yourself on par with God. And so that's why when you see ceramic tiles in mosques and things, or anywhere, you see a lot of abstract patterning, or florals, things like that. You don't see portraiture, right? You don't see portraiture of humans. Um, the exception to portraiture, and it's done in an interesting way, is for martyrs, and it's a blacked out silhouette, so you don't ever see the visage of any of human beings. There was a hotel in San Francisco that was owned by a Muslim man, and in the dining room, they had a number of these portraits of martyrs. And I don't remember why we were staying there. We stayed there, oh, because Omar was doing Landmark, and I went into San Francisco and we stayed at this hotel. And I said something to them about the paintings at the checkout, and the guy was shocked that I knew what they were. He's like, "Oh, how do you know what that is?" I'm like, "Oh," I said, "Well, were those family members of yours?" And he was like, "Oh." So setting up this loom. But anyway, the DIA has a huge collection of rugs, and traditionally, art. I mean, things that are made are supposed to only be useful things, utilitarian things, in Islamic culture, and any kind of adornment is supposed to be kept minimal, and the types of things for everyday use are supposed to only be abstracted forms or geometric forms, and anything with higher quality materials, like if you start using precious metals, those things are only supposed to be for the mosque. And if you don't adhere to those things, then you are harmed, right? Because that's the way things are done in that type of tribal society. So anyway, that's where it was in that class that I had one of our assignments when we did the section on Islamic art, um, and we saw the rugs that they had. I had to know some of the patterns. I don't remember what all of the patterns are, but I had to be able to identify some specific tribal patterns and some floral patterns and some knots. There were like 3 or 4 different knots that we had to learn and had to make a sample. Then one of the assignments was we had to make a small sample, like a mouse pad size sample, right? So that's why I know how to do this. That's why I know how to put this loom together and do what I'm doing. So the rugs that they had, oh my gosh, I think the oldest one they had was like over 1,000 years old. Really, really amazing. And particularly when you juxtapose the actual item next to the knowledge of what technologies were at the time. And I'm not just talking about, how how a loom is fabricated, but how the materials to make things are fabricated. Um, so, rugs for were born of nomadic society, right? They were the walls of your yurt. They were the ceiling of your yurt. They were the floor of your yurt, right? And then the outside was the felt, and then the interior was covered with these rugs. And you would take your shoes off. You have to take your shoes off when you would come in, um, to the structure, to the nomadic structure. But you the populations were largely herding populations, and so these products were made from the animals that they were herding, that they were farming, um, ranching, so to speak. Um, yeah, so you'd have to have a flock, and the first thing that you would do with your flock when you were starting your family would be to make your rugs, and you would have some things that would be given to you, as wedding gifts to start off with, but you would be expected to use your flock to first furnish your family, and then you'd be able to sell from there. Um, oh my God. But the women were never paid for that work, right? It was mostly the women When you see, I've watched some documentaries on rug making now, and talking about keeping the craft alive, and this is why it's been so hard in places that have become more modern, because the history is so hard, right? It really is an abuse of women, and rugs that were sold then by community for trade, right? The women who made them never got a dime, right? They were slaves. And it was largely women who did that specific work, right? The men did the trading. They did the selling and the herding, right? Yeah. 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 But you see different places. You'll see men working in on rugs and stuff. Like when you see the Indian rug factories, you see a lot of men working there. But that's a cultural difference. That's a cultural difference. Yeah. I've been watching a lot of fabrication documentary clips, videos. I'm assuming are in Bangladesh and Pakistan, recycling materials, and all of them, there's not a woman in any of them. You don't see a woman in any of them. It's all men and boys. And some of the boys that work in these factories are really, really young. I was watching one yesterday about they were recycling textiles, and I was watching, they were dumping them into these vats and bleaching them out, and then eventually breaking down all of the textile into cotton bat fiber, like fluffy batting kind of like fiber. From there, it can be respun into threads or used as batting in things like comforters or stuffing in stuff. And also watched one on polyfiber fill, recycling bottles into polyfiber fill thing as well, stuff as well, which was interesting. That was very, very interesting. Um, but watching the one with the textiles, these giant vats, these guys barefoot dumping lye into these giant vats, super concentrations of bleach, huge vats with thousands of pounds of textile in them, and then pulling that out after it's soaked and bleached for 24 hours, right? A lot of stuff that they had in bags it looked like it was like the cutoffs or the scrap from like making jeans and sweatshirts and um, stuff like that, right? Yeah, it was interesting watching that process. But I'm like, how many of those guys fall in those bleach vats and die? How many of those guys do? I don't know. I don't know. A lot of kids. A lot of kids. A lot of kids working in those factories too. Hmm. No women. No women. I have to wonder, like, how much are they getting paid? How much are they getting paid? And where are their women? It doesn't say anywhere in the video, like, where the video is made. This one said it took 4 days to make the video, so that's like showing how long the process is to do this, right? All that the cotton fiber, cotton, because I'm sure it's not pure cotton. Um, when any fiber is recycled in that way, it's not as high quality. The quality is lowered, because you have a shorter fiber for grabbing, so you have less tensile strength in the finished product. So it's I don't know what they're using to make that, if they're making threads out of that. I don't know what they're weaving with that. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But when I was watching the one with the polyfiber fill, recycling the bottles, that was a really interesting process. Enormous, enormous, enormous machines. And I looked at the machines, and they look like stuff that's just been picked off a landfill and glued together, right? Like the machines do. I'm like, where do they make these machines? who makes these machines? It's like so when it comes to the bottle, so the first thing they do is cut off the labels, and they go through an initial rinse, and the caps are separated, and all the colors are separated, and then they get shredded, and then they get rinsed again, then they get shredded again, then they get rinsed again, and then eventually they get down into these real small pieces, and then they get stuffed into a melting vat, and then the melting vat pushes them through an extruder that's like a colander. These very fine threads um, come through, and then when they fall down this long column, which I'm sure it's to cool it to a certain point, and then a guy grabs them, and they're all the threads are grabbed and pulled through, put through a like through like a hook and eye kind of thing, and run through water baths, which I guess are to change the temperature. It's probably hot water. I was like, how much water do they use in this process? I mean, because the amount of copious amounts of water. There they are out in the desert. Everything's dry as fuck or all around them. They're using all this water to recycle. I'm like, where's this water coming from? Where's this water coming from, and how much of it do they use? Right? Like, it's a lot of water. Um, and then they make these big spools. They get wound onto like giant bobbins, like thread, and then those threads get pulled together and go through like a roll mill and another water bath that kind of mushes them, and they become they get a different texture, and then all of that is baled, like lengths of that is baled, and then those bales get put into this into like a big giant carting and shredding machine until it finally becomes a fluff, and then that fluff is baled, and then it's done. It was a really interesting process, yeah, to watch. But I'm like, wow, like, well, plastic has to have very specific qualities in order to be able to do that. Um, and it's like the water has to be a very specific temperature. Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy watching it. No women, all men and boys. Little boys. Some of them look as young as like 8, 9 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like all of this stuff is informing this process that I'm doing right now, setting up this loom. Yeah. So eventually there'll be writing that goes along with the work. There's been a bunch of stuff in my feed coming up about Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle, I'm speaking directly to you right now. Take some fucking accountability for your life and the work that you do, because you're really offensive. You really, really are. You steal from so many people. You've stolen from me. You've stolen from me. You know, you have millions of dollars dumped at you by companies like Netflix and countries like the fucking UK bankrolling you. And all you want to do is to be, oh, put me in makeup and put me on TV. You contribute nothing. You contribute nothing of any kind of relatability or quality content, and what you put out there is stolen content from other people who actually have life experience. You need to do something different with your life if you expect any kind of validation or anybody to give a shit about what you're doing, because you're just really gross. You are. You're disgusting. You're disgusting. All the plagiarism that you've done, and you're disgusting. You're disgusting. Yeah. Truly. 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 Nobody's impressed by your princess lifestyle. Nobody is. In this day and age, it's grotesque. It's grotesque. The whole thing. I hope Miss Ina takes you to the cleaners. Truly, I do. Yeah. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, the Taliban has passed a law saying that women are not allowed to speak. Yeah. Megan, I wish you'd shut the fuck up. Oh my God. You know, you think that you would use your position to empower other women instead of living glamorously the way you do. And I'm not saying that I begrudge you having nice things. I don't. But the flaunting of your extravagance is really grotesque. Yeah, truly is. Oh my God. Mm. I had some strange dreams last night. And I woke up with an Aretha Franklin song in my head. I did. Take me to heart, and I'll always love you, and nobody could make me do wrong. Take me for granted, leaving love unshown, makes willpower weak and temptation strong. Woman's only human, this you should understand. She's not just a plaything, she's flesh and blood, just like a man. And if you wanna do right all day, woman, you gotta be a do right all night man. This woman's only human, this you should understand. I'm not just a plaything, I'm flesh and blood, just like you, man. And if you wanna do right all day, woman, you gotta be a do right all night man. You gotta be a do right all night man. They say it's a man's world, but you can't prove that by me. And as long as we're together, baby, show some respect for me. And if you wanna do right all day, woman, you gotta be a do right all night right man. Right? Hmm. Hmm. Anyway. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah. So, that's where my mind is right now. That's where my heart is. Hmm. Yeah. Let's tell a story of a tidal wave. We run out of luck. We run out of days. We run out of gas. 100 miles away from a station, there's a war and a plague. Here he comes. Hey, how are you?
Okay, here's coffee.
Aren't you gonna get going here?
No, I'm only I'm gonna just gonna go for like half a day today and with the rest at home.
Okay.
Basically, drive to avoid traffic.
Okay. Then I'll probably go grocery shopping today.
Okay. Like I'll probably leave like 10:30.
Oh, okay. All right.
Are you done with your tea?
Yeah.
Open or closed? And Brody or no Brody? Actually, Brody, you need to come with me.
Brody, go with Daddy and then close the door so he doesn't come back up here trying to be a pain in the ass. Brody, go.
Let's go.
Wood. Yeah. You know, I love it. I love when people have said, have made some shitty comments to me about, you know, like when I talk about Islam, right? And I'm like, look, I don't care if you like what I have to say or not, but you're talking to somebody who has direct experience, right? Like I am not some, you know, I'm not some weird far right Christian Bible thumper or living out on a Mormon commune somewhere who doesn't have any kind of experience or exposure to. I'm telling, you know, it's like the things that I'm talking about are from my direct lived experience, right? My husband's parents were Muslim. Yeah. And my advice to anyone out there, if you're a Christian, don't marry a Muslim. If you're a Muslim, don't marry a Christian. My advice to anyone is truly find somebody of your own faith. And not because like you can't fall in love with somebody from a different faith, or because someone from a different faith isn't good enough, but because it really is hard. It really, 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 really is hard. It's really hard. You don't belong to either community. You know, you truly don't. And both sides of the family are unhappy unless one converts. Right? I mean, my grandma Rose converted to Catholicism from Orthodoxy when she married my grandfather. And there was trouble there too. You know? Yeah. It's hard. And he'd be in danger you know, from Islamists as well. They'd go after him every bit as much as they go after me, right? Because he's considered an apostate, right? Mm. Anyway.